Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. We have a program today that's based in space history, where on this date in 1959, NASA started talking about what I think is one of the, arguably, the most important part of a spaceship to get the human beings back alive. And what would that be, Marty? My cameraman co-producer here. What do you think would be one of the most important, arguably the most important element of any spaceship to bring them safely to Earth?
The astronaut.
The astronaut, that's right. The heat shield is arguably something that has to work right, or everything else down the line, that last phase, bingo. So we're going to look at this time in history when NASA was looking in 1959. Get your calculator out and figure how long ago that was. Looking into ablative heat shields, which was peeling away some of the material in other devices. And we'll look at what is being used on today's human-rated spaceships. So we're glad that you're with us today. We thank Connie McDaniel for getting our Streamlabs board all set up here. And Marty's here tutoring her. She's doing a great job. We had a wonderful show yesterday. Marty, today is number 725, episode 725 that you and I have been doing. Stay Curious, born out of that horrible pandemic. Our first program was March 23rd, 2020, and we continue strongly with the support of our whole team here at the American Space Museum, including Executive Director Karen Conklin and our board of directors. In fact, we're quite amazed at how well you all receive Stay Curious. So we appreciate you watching on YouTube. That's where we make some money, a little bit, maybe a quarter a show based on how many ads you watch. And of course, we thank Facebook Live for being on continuously for over 2.5 years. Episode 725, queuing up here. Beautiful green screen. No, wait. You'd think I'd get used to it by now. Beautiful green screen over here. There is the little horn of paradise for us here on the Space Coast. There is Rocket Row, and sticking out there's the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge and Cape Canaveral Space Force. Beautiful day here. A little chilly. People from the north like that. Down here it's like a nice fall day in October up there for you northerners. But Marty, you look like you were going to say something. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to kick off the show here with reminding you we do have a whole history of our shows on Facebook. Every one of them's on Facebook, and over half of them are on YouTube. And some of them are broke out into different sections. So we wanted to... But yesterday we did a show on space planes, and I didn't show our exhibit of our space planes here, that we have a few models there on top of our Apollo console that show you some concepts of space planes there, a couple over my head, just like we talked about. So many of them were going to be 2 reusable spacecraft, the first getting it up to that 20-mile first stage level, and then the rest is easy to get into orbit from there. So these are some space planes we have. They're not in too good a shape, admittedly, but they're rare, and we show them to inspire the next generation of how things worked out and were thought of back in the 50s. These models come from, in 60s. Behind you there's that lawn chair. You'd all love to have that on summertime. That's the lawn chair that Norm Thagard rode back to Earth on STS-71 after his 5-month stay on the Russian Mir space station. And we're going to be seeing Norm out at Kennedy Visitors Complex this month of January. So if you're visiting, check out the Astronaut of the Day. We certainly enjoy seeing a new astronaut about twice a week. We being Marty and I go out, and Connie and our ultra volunteer here, Connie, and Anita Truex, our awesome office manager. We're going out there and supporting them and saying hi to Nick Thomas and all the other astronaut wranglers out there. It's a great program. Work your vacation around Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. See an astronaut and then see Atlantis. You'll never forget it. So they didn't have to pay me to say that this time, Marty. Well, we've got some astronaut birthdays. today, let me put on my party hat as we've got 4 astronauts represent 604 days in space, each doing some amazing tasks for the Space Shuttle and International Space Station and even the Russian Mir Space Station. Needed to put them all together in a meme, and I'll do that next year, I guarantee, as we wish a happy birthday. First, the astronauts are Guy Gardner of America, Colin Michael Foale of England, then Philip Perrin of Morocco, and David St. Jacques of Canada are our birthday boys today. And first up is Guy Gardner, was born January 6, 1948 in Alta Vista, Virginia, and grew up in the Alexandria, Virginia area. That's the all government area there, the Washington, D.C. area, the Beltway is what I was trying to say. He's an Air Force officer, Vietnam veteran, 177 combat missions, Marty, in Vietnam. 2 shuttles, 27 in 1988 and STS-35 in 1990. We met him out at the astronaut encounter. He was a delightful man. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. There I am. There he is. That's how he looks today. Just a few days short of his 75th birthday that he's celebrating today. There's Nick Thomas, the astronaut wrangler. Look at those kids engaged. He's smiling at them. He spent his post-astronaut days as the president of, which university? I got the wrong sheet in front of me here on the birthdays. He was a university professor, okay, and president of a small college. I'm sorry that I can't find that in my notes, but you can read about it on Facebook where I posted his birthday. He approached his talk like a professor, and he went to, what adjectives do you think of when you think of going to space? And people would say scared or thrilling or whatever. And he really played into that, didn't he, Marty? He was really a good speaker. We enjoyed him a lot, and he'll be back at the Space Center. Happy 75th birthday to Guy Gardner today. And then we've got this guy, Mike Foale. He has got quite an astronaut resume. Born in Louth, Lincolnshire, England. I'll bet Robert Law's been there. Robert, hello to you up in Dundee, Scotland. TGIF here in America, my friend. Foale has got 374 days in space, a record for a UK citizen, 4 EVAs. He had an EVA outside the Hubble in the Mir. I mean, the shuttle in the Mir. Nobody's done that. And he had extended missions on both the Mir and the ISS, and nobody's done that. I'd love to meet him. He's a great guy, apparently. And he almost lost his life when a cargo ship crashed into the Mir space station during his stay. Here he is out in training with Triple T out there in the tank exercise there, the M13 tank that was going to save him if that shuttle was going to blow up. And speaking of Triple T, talked to him this week. He's doing fine, and we're going to work a couple of programs together for this month with Travis Thompson, the lead of the White Room for the shuttle. And another happy birthday to Philip Perrin, was born in Meknes, Morocco. He served as a mission specialist on STS-111 for the ESA contract of putting astronauts from Europe up there. And he's got 13 days in space, and don't know a whole lot about him, but we'll just, what can you say? He's one of 500, and I think we're up to 594 humans have orbited the Earth, and he's one of them. And our final birthday boy today is David St. Jacques, born in Quebec City, Quebec, Canada. A lot of Marquettes up there in Quebec, Canada, Marty. I remember looking at the phone book one day when I was near there one time. At any rate, he is an active astronaut for the Canada Space Agency. Spent 204 days in space. All right. He's 53 years old. And that's not too old to go to space again. 2 expeditions. He was on part of 3 expedition cruise, 57, 58, and 59 in 2019. And he has rode a Soyuz spacecraft to space too. So he's been in 2 spaceships. So a happy birthday to those 3 guys. And we love celebrating astronaut birthdays on our video podcast because they're in our communities, whether they're in Europe or Canada or the U.S. They're doing great things to inspire the next generation. Wow, look at that green screen there of our beautiful peninsula there, the lake over here. Again, we're right up in here, the Tampa area across the way from us there. So just a gorgeous look up the peninsula corridor here. And if you come down here, please come and see us. Those of you that don't know, that's Orlando, right in this area, just 50 miles away where all the attractions are there. So, well, we love celebrating space history, me being our team here that puts together Stay Curious. And our research coordinator was looking at January 6th, and in 1959, the Mercury spacecraft heat protection was brought up to a NASA board. 2 plans were considered, a beryllium heat sink and ablation, all right? And they basically kind of got a combination of both of them. Based on the meeting, they were going to accommodate interchangeable ablative heat shields and beryllium heat sinks, okay? And another big player in the Mercury capsule is the Rene 41 composite heat-resistant shingles that cover it. There are little sections of shingles there. But what inspired me to talk about this was being out at the Kennedy Visitors Complex and in the Mars building there, and there is this huge display of the heat shield of Orion. And Orion's heat shield is this full phase, and they have a little graphics going on behind it. It looks like it's re-entry, pretty cool. That's Orion's. And then they have the Apollo, Gemini, and Mercury heat shields superimposed on them. Right there they are. All right. And so you see how much larger, or the first line is that's the Apollo. And then you got the Gemini and the Mercury ahead up there. So the actual dimensions, to give you some facts out there, is 16.5 feet for the Orion heat shield and 12 feet 10 inches for the Apollo command module. Come on, couldn't you just make it 13 feet? I've always, and Marty and I had a discussion, it is all on the payload, the boost getting up there, but man, you could have thought they could have planned a little bigger, just made these lists a little more spacious, because Elon Musk for spaceships are, and but it's all the thrust of those engines that determine the weight and so forth. But this heat shield of the command module on Apollo was, of course, the generation of what they were thinking about in this meeting in 1959, 64 years ago. And an ablative heat shield that they decided on consists of a layer of plastic resin, the outer surface of which is heated up during re-entry up to 3,000 degrees, and it turns into a gas, and that carries away the heat from the spacecraft in convections. These shields were used on the first 3 spacecrafts of America, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and are similar systems used on the Crew Dragon, and we'll see that in a minute, and is also being used on the Orion spacecraft with a different twist. All right. Other types, it could be a thermal, where what the space shuttle did was what they call a thermal soak heat shield. All right, the thermal protection system, TPS, for the shuttle consisted of ceramic or composite tiles all over the vehicle, and they were thicknesses were depending on where the biggest heat distribution was. And then after a few flights of Columbia, they started putting blankets over the cargo doors and the rudder and stuff like that. So quite a progression here. We're not going to get a whole detail on there, but we're going to also enlighten you that some of you may own pieces of a Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo heat shield, and someday want to add the heat shield of the Orion to your collection. And we're going to touch on that these are available at auctions. We've sold them in our auctions before. Marty, I haven't seen all the details yet of the information from the successful Orion spacecraft, but one of the big tests, of course, was that reentry from a lunar orbit of which is a lot faster than coming back from 250 miles above the Earth, with something like 15,000 miles an hour. The reentry is definitely a factor, and the heat shield performed good. They did a little skipping maneuver, came in and skipped out to dissipate some energy and then plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere. I'm sure lots of you have learned about that in the last month since the successful Orion Artemis 1 spaceship. So let's look at some heat shields. This is Gemini 8. All right, Gemini 8. No, I take that back. This is a Mercury capsule. This is Wally Schirra's Sigma 7. Mercury 8 capsule. And on all the heat shields, you see that there's this pattern that flows off of them. And you can really see a distinctive imbalance on some of them sometimes, where there was a weight distribution, and usually they're spinning in a slow roll to dissipate that heat all over that shield as the blade of shield is coming off, and that's why you have the streaks there to show that. In our Mercury Gemini gallery, we have two samples of the heat shield of Gemini 6 and Gemini 7, both in the same plastic cube. We have them on our exhibit here in our museum over here, showing you the different levels of composite materials that make up the heat shield. And at the top is the ablative part that chips away on there. So isn't that, this is kind of rare to have this, a heat shield plug, they call them. We'll see a couple here in a minute, another one here in a minute. Usually go $400 to $500, a little plug in one little acrylic cube there. This certainly would go for well up to a couple $1,000 because it's two missions that met each other in space, and we've got photographs of each of these heat shields. That is the outside of the heat shield at the top and on the bottom there. So no need to grab that out of our case. You see it better right there in the photograph, but many of you have visited our museum and seen that. And stick around and stay curious for the end of the show, because I'm going to end the week with 5 or 6 pictures inside our museum to tease some of you to come, but to warm the hearts of some of you that have been here and seen some artifacts that you've enjoyed over the years. So this is a heat shield plug inside a Gemini capsule. And this type of display was very common back in the day. I have not talked to any of the collectors of how this really originated. Given to key employees. This wasn't put on the shelves at Kennedy Visitors Complex for sale. This was given to you as a key employee for helping make this a successful mission. And these type of things, and it's a small, very small thing, like coffee cup size here. Don't mind if I do. I sense. I don't know, Marty, what these go for. At least $400 or $500 probably, because they're beautiful in any space cave display. Here is a plug taken out of a heat shield from Apollo to show you kind of the depth of it. And then they do this for engineering purposes. And sometimes they'll put them back in, or they'll put a dummy back in there, so that when the vehicle goes on display, and you can find these as you look at heat shields at all of these human spacecraft that are in our museums around our great country and even in Europe. But there's the different layers there. You get a good sense of it. Then maybe somebody bought that, or NASA did, and chopped it up into smaller pieces and put it in a glass or acrylic and handed it to you as a gift. Well, this is the shingles on this Gemini spacecraft here, one of the most famous Gemini spacecraft that you cannot see, okay, unfortunately. This is Gemini 2. And Gemini 2 is out at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Museum that you have to buy a special ticket to get. And I'm not even sure they're selling those tickets, are they, Marty?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it was like a $25 add-on. But this is famous because this is the only spacecraft that flew twice in space until Columbia did it and returned to space in November 81 after a successful April 81 mission. This was launched on a Titan II rocket. The spacecraft was used for the Gemini 2 mission, was later refurbished in what was called the Gemini B configuration, and was subsequently launched on another suborbital flight as a test for the U.S. Air Force Manned Orbiting Laboratory, otherwise known as MOLE. It was the first spacecraft to make more than one space flight since the X-15, and because the X-15 is a space plane, it did get up above that Kármán line of 100 kilometers several times with several pilots. And it would be the only reused space capsule until Crew Dragon of Endeavour was launched for the second time. So what we have in the next picture here is a famous face to everybody out there, the great Bob Crippen. And this is Bob in front of the heat shield of this. And as you notice at the top, the hole was cut in it. Marty, you might help me with the arrow up there to show that dark area is the hole that was going to be the tunnel passageway into the manned orbiting laboratory that was nothing more than a rocket shell that was cleared out like a Titan II rocket and have all kinds of surveillance equipment, photography equipment, radio, all sorts of things in there, and a little bit of science for sure. Just like we did with Skylab and gutted a third stage of the Saturn rocket to create the Skylab space station. So they had to make sure that the heat shield would be pulled out, and then they could stick it back in there inside the Gemini spacecraft, and that it would indeed not burn up, and that their seals around it would work. And it did. And there you see what I'm talking about. Down here is where the ablative shield is off center and off axis. You can see how the material peeled away there on this famous reentry. And that was in, what date was that? That was about 1966 or 65, somewhere in there. This is a heat shield of one of the Apollo spacecraft. As I've noticed, and many of us looking at our Apollo spacecraft in captivity all these years, they are deteriorating by Earth air also. All of this was not on a heat shield thing when it re-entered. Some of these things have been chipped off and pulled off, and discoloration as exposed to the natural elements in wherever they're being stored. But it gives you an idea of how burned up they are. And the Cosmosphere in Kansas, Hutchinson, Kansas, has Apollo 13. And there I am about 5 years ago looking and leaning against the glass. They've actually got the Apollo 13 in a glass case, just like Apollo 16's in a case at the Huntsville U.S. Rocket Center. They both look like jewelry in there. And but they've got this illuminated, and it changes colors and so forth on there. And I was kind of mesmerized by it, and set my camera on something to get a selfie of me checking that out. A very cool display of the Apollo 13, which was a very big question if it had suffered any damage during the explosion on the way to the moon. That was a big deal, wasn't it, Marty? Because there was such a violent explosion. They were worried it had cracked, and then had the cold of space done more to it. So, and here is a plug, like we've talked about, a different way to show it from the Apollo 13 spacecraft from 1970. The black part would have been exposed to space on reentry, and the rest of it in there. And I mentioned these go to $400 to $500. Sometimes some people fight over them a little bit more. This was sold July 2019 at Christie's, a famous auction. Marty, hold on to your seat. $6,875 was the proud owner's bid for this. Plus, they throw about a 20% service fee on it. So this thing went for well over $7,000 because it was Apollo 13. All right. If you're going to own something from a heat shield, boy, is that the one. Either if you can't get Apollo 11, you got Apollo 13. So an idea that, some people have more money than sense, huh, Marty? He's nodding his head, but he don't want to verbally agree to put some of you rich people out there on notice. No, we think it's great. What we think great about it, these go to great homes. They're going to be preserved for centuries, just like we're looking at Civil War items that are 170 years old now. 1860s, okay, at 160 to 1860, you got 2020, right? So our artifacts in our museum are about 60 years old, and we pray that these items, like those the Gemini 6 and 7 plugs I showed you earlier, will be seen 100 years from now like a Civil War memento. Well, what we're looking at here, talking heat shield, is the marshmallow with the burnt heat shield. I like pulling that end of it off and eating that old carbon marshmallow. But of course, that's one of the Crew Dragons coming back to Earth, being hoisted into that neat little ship that we had. Alex Carl was aboard that, our ESA Eurocom. Hope you're watching, Alex. Reminds me to get a hold of him. He was on the last recovery with Samantha Cristoforetti, ESA astronaut, on board. So what they have here on the heat shields for the SpaceX, they have thermal protection tiles on the end, and they've done some rigorous testing of it, but they're a combination of an ablative shield in tiles, kind of a generation of them. Their technology, it's called carbon phenolic, okay? It's lightweight, heat resistant, insulated, and durable. Carbon phenolic, PHENOLIC. It's a substance made of layers of carbon fabric held together by a special plastic glue that's called Gorilla Glue. Probably. You'd like to know, wouldn't you? So that's what they're doing, and they don't. They could replace it. I think they usually do, but this is one of the returns there, and again borrowing Mercury, Gemini, Apollo technology and merging it with the shuttle technology. Now here is the 16-foot Orion shield being manufactured before it was put on the spacecraft, and the Orion and the Starliner spacecraft of Boeing, look alike. They look like the Apollo command module. Let's just put it that way. But we're going to show you in a minute that the Starliner has a different twist to it. Here is the Starliner. The Starliner has an ablative shield that has composites on it also. Not much of it is burning away like in the Mercury and Apollo days in Gemini. But this heat shield drops away at 4,000 feet, just about a mile up after reentry. It falls off into the desert where Starliner's going to land, and those red bags are the inflatable cushions that it lands on at hopefully about a 3 to 5 mile an hour impact on there. And here is the Dream Chaser, and you see that gentleman on the far left there in the lower corner standing there. Well, that's so it gives you an idea. This Dream Chaser is not very big. They got windows on it, folks. This was one of their prototypes that they flew, I believe. So it could be crewed by 1 or 2 people eventually, but they're selling it now to NASA as a cargo ship to go up to the space station. But boy, wouldn't it be nice to have 1 or 2 of these parked up there right now as the rescue for astronauts and cosmonauts and Euronauts and whatever knots you want to be up there. in case of the problem, which the problem of the Soyuz leaking we'll talk about next week on Stay Curious. I was around some people in the know, and definitely it was not a micrometeoroid. I'll say that, and you stay curious next week, and we'll talk about the ISS and options for the what could be a crippled Soyuz spacecraft to get the 3 cosmonauts back by March. With 7 astronauts up there orbiting now, this Dream Chaser is in the mix to go up there. What are its heat shields? It uses space shuttle technology. The heat shield. Where's my notes on that? It has the technology of the. I was looking. It has 2,000 tiles on it. All right, that's what I was looking for on my sheet here. It has 2,000 tiles on it, where the shuttle had over 30,000 tiles. Okay, so it's covered both ends. The bottom, the black ones, obviously, for more heat, and then the white ones around there are a tile type fabric that they're putting around this. What's going to be a cute little space plane, much like the dinosaur, kind of, Marty, there's your dinosaur of the 1960s, the space plane that the Air Force was hoping to build a few hundred of and have immediate 1 or 2 seater access to low Earth orbit or transoceanic flights with that heat shield bringing them just above the Earth and bringing them back. So I wanted to back up here that the Starliner there has a honeycomb structure that's hand-filled with lightweight ablative material that can reduce 3,000 degree temperature to about 300 degrees by converting heat to gas. Again, the ablative technique, and not much of it is designed to burn away. And I remember looking at the Starliner prototypes at the Kennedy Visitors Complex, and the whole vehicle basically has a honeycomb structure to it. And some of it was from the first 3D modeling fabricated. So there it is there. That was the Orion. All right, so to end our little Stay Curious program here, we got to talk about the mother of all ablative heat shields, of all heat shields. It's going to be the Starliner. No vehicle will be covered with more protection for reentry than this behemoth of SpaceX. Behind me here is 3 photos showing you one on the bottom is the left to right is a Starship out in Texas being put up on the booster rocket. The BFF it's called, Big Friggin' Rocket, is no kidding what Elon Musk's like calling it. And this BFF behind me here in the final version, this whole thing, they're building a gantry for at pad 39A that SpaceX launches from. And the Starliner's up above it. You see real well the black reentry heat shields on it, and we'll look at those in detail here. So this thing is the size of a Saturn V rocket. Make no mistake about it. And this is going to be a huge liftoff, and we can't wait for that. But they're in Boca Chica, Texas, and I believe he has his Starship that he's built now for the first complete orbital test. And so stay tuned for that. They've not really announced a date, but they're hoping to do it before summer. There is the Starship out there. Remember, we had Ellie in Space. Hi, Ellie in Space. We're big fans of your podcast like you are ours. She's gone out there a lot. You could just drive out there, like driving out to the beaches out here. And there you see all these rockets at different stages of development being built there. It's quite a rocket farm out there. But Musk is going to probably move most of that operations over here to the Space Coast soon. He has got a massive facility to service the Starship he's building across from Kennedy Visitors Complex, basically. Well, here's what their tiles look like far away, okay? And when they fuel this baby up, the low, cold, super cold hydrogen, I think he used methane actually, some of the tiles came off. And the tiles that Musk is using is a derivative of the shuttle era. Let me get my SpaceX. Starship heat shields are thinner than the space shuttle orbital ties. He's going with this pattern of a octagon type look. They're made from a dense, tough ceramic, which is called Tufrock. Tufrok. Tufrock. Whereas the orbiter tiles had a fiber foam aerogel core that was very insulating, but rather fractional and prone to absorbing moisture. So, improving on the shuttle TPS system. Here, of course, in the shuttle technology was out of the 1970s and 80s, for heaven's sakes. So here in the 21st century, this is what these tiles look like, and they got these little adhesive, these little points out there to apply them to, and far away they look like this. Okay. And the artist concept, we're talking Elon Musk here. He crashed over 20 Falcon 9s before the first one landed, or at least a dozen of them. So he will definitely make sure this works one day, and we hope it's by this summer. And when it orbits the Earth and then comes back for a landing, we're thinking it's going to look like this. There's the heat shields up close. Artist concept of it coming in. All right. Some of us have seen it come in from its, you can't even call it suborbital flights. It went up 30,000 feet or something like that and came back down like an airliner. But this is the money shot, folks. This is the concept that very few people are promoting, even within the NASA community, that the Orion spacecraft lower left is about to dock with the lunar outpost, and the Starship is on the other side. And to scale, the Starship completely dwarfs the lunar outpost, okay? But this is what we're landing on the moon with, okay? And this has the contract. It's not an Apollo lunar module on steroids. This is the real concept. And Doug Forrest, you're an artist out there. I think you agree with me. We don't see this concept enough out there in the public yet. Thank you for watching, Doug. Hope you have a great weekend with your lovely wife. Gary Gerald's watching in Georgia. Thank you, sir. Dave Stange, Melissa Pope, their faithful watchers. Steve Hammer, Cynthia Rossi, Tom Celentano. Thank you for watching. Good to see you coming on board there, Daniel DeYoung, our favorite airline pilot. He flies for Spirit Airlines around the country. And I said, and hi to Tom and Mark Usiak. Marty, what do you think of this concept here, to give you an excuse to say hi on our USIAC microphone there that they bought for us?
Oh, it's very similar to the shuttle docking with space station.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I've not seen a docking port in the Starship. See where they've got that thing docked about in the middle of the belly. Of course, 2/3 of this is 2 tanks, one oxidizer and the other the fuel. This is going to land on the moon and not be refueled and then come off the moon. And boy, we can't wait to see this picture, particularly this elevator working to get the lunar rover down and some people. But there's an astronaut at the base there, so you get an idea. Marty, I'd buy a couple 100 feet of Walmart rope, too, to take along with me, wouldn't you?
I'd bring something for redundancy.
Yeah, absolutely there. So, but we're going to be sharing this a lot as we're getting closer to the Artemis going. We're not getting closer to going to the moon. It's going to be at least 3 years. The next flight will be hopefully a year from now, where they're going to orbit the moon. But this is the concept, and they're going to have a blade of... I really doubt, and I wonder if you all are thinking like me, that once Musk gets one of these starships in lunar orbit, that'll never come back to Earth. He'll use that to go up and down to the moon as many times as it's, structurally sound to do that. Don't you think, Marty? And they're using the Orion as a Uber. Go ahead, Marty. I was asking if you thought that would be logical.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
There'd be no reason to bring it back.
No, and once he gets these things working, he's used one Falcon 9 15 times now. So, well, we hope that you've enjoyed looking at the different types of reentry materials have been considered the first time in 1959 on this date of how to bring back an astronaut safely in that cramped and tiny Mercury capsule. So I wanted to quickly give you all a thank you for loving our museum, loving our podcast. So we've kicked off a new week now in 2023. We got Connie McDaniel helping us and hopefully give Marty some downtime a little bit. He's got a wonderful family here on the Space Coast and on the East Coast that he can now visit and not have to worry about old Mark here. But here is a look at our Apollo gallery, looking into our Apollo console there with our old wore-out carpet that we got replaced a couple months ago. And you'll see some pictures of that. I guess I'll go back there and say we wanted to point out that we've got our mannequin Bob Smeet in the background. Point that out, would you, Marty? Bob Smeet is the Smeet uniform that Bob Crippen wore. And he gave us that. We're quite proud of that. And that is a real Artemis generation spacesuit that Gary Harris designed for NASA as a prototype. It has a hatch in the back to get in, one piece like the Russian Orlan suit. And, of course, we love the showcase at the end, our Cape Canaveral gallery, that is all illuminated with all kinds of equipment that was used, and some of it at pad 36, some pad 19, some 14, but all of it used at Cape Canaveral during the good old days of the 50s and 60s to launch over 400 Atlas rockets. And we have the button that pushed John Glenn, although it wasn't in this fancy mahogany display case. It was just in a console like I just showed you. Tom O'Malley pushed that button, an actual button, to ignite the engines on that Atlas II rocket. And so who has that? Nobody but us. And the only place that you can put your hand on top of Sally Ride, God bless her. When you do, you're going to say, wow, what a tiny lady she was. And she was a very, very petite lady. And her hands, look at how worn they are there. We have beside her in our women's gallery, Eileen Collins, and at the far end are Kathy Sullivan, the first American woman spacewalker, and of course Eileen Collins, the world's first pilot and then commander of a spaceship, that being the shuttle. And there's a dozen of the 72 women on the wall there that we have. All 72 women who orbited the Earth are on our wonderful and popular Women's in Space gallery. And look at our beautiful carpet there that we're so proud of, and our taste of our shuttle gallery. And we love pointing out that these models of the space shuttle, like that one of the remote service structure and the LUT, right, or LUT, Marty, right? Remote service structure, and the shuttle itself. These were all built over 50 years ago by the Nixon administration to show contractors, Congress, and all the big shots what they were talking about. And that actually closes up around the shuttle. Very cool model. And then years later, it sat outside the secretary, sitting outside the office of the Kennedy Space Center director. What I really love is bequeathed to us on the wall there. Would you please point out, Marty, the hatch covers that were on the hatches of the last 3 space shuttles, and those were fabricated by Triple T, Travis Thompson. He hand-colored those in with a black magic marker, and then they hung on the hatch until they got the crew in, and they took them off and closed the hatch. But the crew signed them, and the launch White Crew room signed them. And they were in the living room of wonderful Mike Leinbach, who launched the last 37 space shuttles as a launch director. And Mike recently, over almost a year and a half ago, at one of our conferences where we talked about his book, Bringing Columbia Home, he bequeathed those to us and just gave them to us instead of all the swag he's gotten over his career, that was some of his favorites, and he thought the museum should have it. And we are so proud and honored to display those of the last three great spaceships of America. And coming home stretch here, our most recent gallery is the Space Worker Gallery, dedicated to all you space workers out there, like Marty Winkle, who worked on about 10 years on the lunar module as electrical engineer and then spent a 30-year career working on the shuttle engines. To them, to me, they are national treasures that have done things that don't translate in today's world. Marty, would you please use your arrow to show where that, I'm going to show them the black box of a space shuttle. You've heard of the black box of a airplane, and they're never black, they're orange, so you can find them easy. But here is a black box of a space shuttle that we have certified was flown many times on a shuttle. It was either used for voice communication recording or engine telemetry. Maybe both, we're not sure. They don't tell us all that. It weighs quite heavy and is worth $1 million. So they're something, some of you that even are regulars here, like you UCEC brothers and Carlton Bailey, maybe you haven't seen this. We have so much to offer that really it's an amazing little museum that captured my heart and actually made me come here and retire to be part of this museum for the rest of my golden years here as a senior. And one last shout out to our console here, real space shuttle consoles that were used to launch the shuttle. They were in the firing room at the LCC Launch Control Center. This particular batch helped monitor the fueling of the external tank. And again, a rare one-of-a-kind thing. When I first came here, we had headsets on there and so forth. And once they were put away for the COVID pandemic, we thought, hey, we don't want to give people any colds or flu either. So we haven't put those back out. And right above my head here is where we're broadcasting from. There is the Hubble famous 30th anniversary cosmic reef that we displayed in our Hubble gallery. And when, because of you, we become so popular that it was made a decision by the board of directors to put Stay Curious in that very room where you see the Hubble poster. And that's where we are right now, folks. And we are very grateful for that decision. It's allowed us to really focus and streamline this show into something that we hope you all enjoy on a daily basis and tell your friends about, to check us out on YouTube and Facebook and come and visit us here. We've had a great first week of January 2023. We look forward to seeing more guests on Stay Curious than last year, which we didn't even count them up. I'll do that when we have our first guest on this year. We had a wall where we had to sign them on. We're going to have a new photo on that wall this year. So, in fact, our first guest will be Mr. Hugh Harris next Wednesday, a ripe and intelligent 90-year-old man, the voice of NASA. Hugh and I are going to kick off the shuttles of the month of January and talk about some of his favorites and touch a little bit on the disasters, because Hugh wrote a small little book on the Challenger disaster, and he certainly has memories of that. But we will say this, that during the month of January and the tragedies of NASA, the Apollo 1, the Challenger, and the Columbia, we always like taking the high road and celebrating the life of our astronaut heroes and not dwelling on the tragedy. It's been, everybody knows what happened. There's books galore and other sources that you can relay. We want to talk about the great people that they were and the legacy that they left behind that inspired other astronauts and a complete renaissance of our space industry. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for a great week. Marty, thank you for teaching Connie the ropes there. Connie, you've done a great job this week. And we've had, we're ready to roar into 2023 and make a difference out there any way we can. So until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying that thank you for watching Stay Curious, and we can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.